You shouldn't be focusing on eating to look a certain way. You should be focusing on eating to perform a certain way.
Dancers have multiple positive and negative side effects to their mental health from full-time dancing.
After doing a survey on this, it was apparent that one of the main issues that dancers face is struggles with their body image.
However, there are other negative factors that dancers face daily.
A negative that you can have when you're here on your mental health is probably like looking in the mirror every day, things like that. It's just, yeah, that's not great for your mental health as a dancer. When you are in like full-time dance training, you are like constantly like overthinking, like, oh, am I doing this right? And yeah, sometimes it can take a toll on dancers' mental health and just training, really. Yeah.
And a negative is that it's very physically demanding, and sometimes that can have impacts on your mental well-being.
A negative is that I'm always injured because I'm just clumsy.
A negative of full-time training on mental health is like the highs and lows. Like one week you can have a really good week and feel like you look really good, and the next week you can feel like you can't dance.
So a negative for me is just the pressures that are placed on dancers to just be perfect all the time.
A negative that comes with full-time training is the kind of comparisons and the pressure you end up putting on yourself without realising.
A negative would be that I definitely don't have a lot of free time to relax or do anything else.
A negative, I would say, is the expectations of dancers' bodies these days is just a lot to handle.
I used to have an eating disorder, so I had anorexia from the ages of about 12 to 18.
My name is Liv, I'm 22 and I started dancing first when I was 3 years old, and since I was young, dance has just been my life basically. It's what I did like every day after school. I used to come home and practice every night, and it's just always been kind of my thing and my escape, and when anything's ever gone wrong, the first thing I've wanted to do is to dance, and it's kind of how I process things.
Do you think it's more likely for dancers to develop an eating disorder?
It definitely is. Like dancers, especially in training, are considered a risk population for developing eating disorders, and the majority of dancers do have some form of disordered eating. I think because you're in tight clothing and like leotards every day in front of mirrors, looking at like 30 other girls who are also in leotards in front of a mirror. Like looking back on videos just before I kind of started recovery and things, I looked incredibly ill, but I was dancing terribly as well. I mean, I had no strength left in my body really, so.
Most dancers are struggling with body dissatisfaction solely because of the studio environments.
When compared to the general population, dancers are more prone to restriction and a drive for thinness. Could you explain your relationship with food while you had an eating disorder?
Yeah, so my eating disorder kind of changed over the years. It definitely got worse as it went on. I think that's quite normal with an ED. It started off as like an unhealthy obsession with being healthy. So over exercising, eating as little as possible, and taking out anything that would be deemed as like unhealthy. And that obviously progressively got worse, and restriction got worse and worse with that. So you kind of tend to see like a competitive thing with eating disorders in terms of being competitive with yourself. So you would go really low one day on what you'd eaten and think, well, you can't ever go higher than that again, because you know you can manage with that amount. And so it would become a lower and lower amount each day, until the point when you're eating as little as possible that you can kind of get away with without people noticing. So it was obviously a very negative relationship with food, very competitive, very much as if it was kind of something that my brain couldn't really see as like fuel or as good. It was just any food became, in the end, even healthy foods became bad to me, and I didn't want to have it basically, yeah.
For dancers, perfectionism is known to be a common personality trait. When combined with an obsession of health and body aesthetics, it increases their risk of disordered eating.
Out of any sport, there's the most eating disorders in dance, and it's estimated that about 77% of dancers are actually at risk for eating disorders. I don't think dancing itself is actually the problem. I think there's a lot of problems surrounding dancing in the environment that are a huge issue. So like the inappropriate comments made, the fact that there are mirrors, and you might be put on stage wearing little to nothing, and obviously people in society want to see a version of, like, the ideal version of a person in underwear is one who's historically been like thinner. And I think the way people think about dancers stereotypically is that it's maybe someone tall, leggy, and thin. There's that kind of body ideal, and then teachers reiterating that, and unhelpful comments made, and a bit of discrimination going on that I think all kind of contribute to it.
Dancers at all levels struggle with poor body image.
Research demonstrates that more than 75% of dancers feel pressure to lose weight, with stress often originating from
comparative mirror thoughts,
tight-fitting uniforms like leotards and costumes,
beliefs that lower body weights offer a performance advantage,
and casting. Many dancers feel a lower body weight might get them a better role.
Is there anything that students or teachers say that may be a trigger for someone with an eating disorder?
Yeah, I think the fact that you're all in an environment together as well, like anything that gets said gets picked up on. So even if people who are quite a healthy weight or a slim build are making comments even about themselves that they think they look too big or whatever in front of people who are bigger, that could be triggering.
Triggers can come from anywhere, including social media.
Research says approximately 70% of images posted on social media have been altered.
The edited pictures we see online that are seemingly perfect of the ideal bodies, faces, and lives of people on social media can have a negative effect on our confidence.
This has a big part to play towards dancers' mental health.
Do you think that you are more prone to injuries when you have an eating disorder as a dancer?
Yeah, definitely. Stress fractures are one of the things that people look for. If someone has a stress fracture, that's kind of flagged up as a sign of an ED. So it affects, if it's a restrictive disorder anyway, it affects your bone health a lot. So like osteoporosis is something that can develop in a lot of people with eating disorders, and anything bone-wise or muscle-wise as well, obviously, with the low energy that you've got in terms of your intake, that puts you at a huge risk for injuries, and your body just doesn't really, it's so weak that it doesn't have the capacity to kind of be strong enough to do that amount of hours without something going wrong.
More than 1 in 2 female dancers and 1 in 3 male dancers do not meet their energy needs.
Disordered eating is associated with injuries in dancers. This relates to not getting enough energy to perform to their best standards.
It's more dangerous to eat too little than it is to eat too much. Like, there's so many health issues that come from not fueling yourself properly that people don't realise. I think a lot of the things as well I probably knew weren't normal, but I was maybe in a bit of denial that it was a problem. So at dance, I would black out. I'd think it was just because I was tired. It wouldn't be like I'd fallen on the floor, but I would literally just kind of go for a minute and then come back. And just my vision would go black, things like that. Being incredibly cold all of the time, to the point where like it's physically painful, and you could be in a hot bath and still feel cold. Being really tired all the time, losing your hair, your skin going really kind of flaky, nails being brittle. There's so many things, kind of just feeling weak, I guess, would be the way to describe it as well. That happened a lot. And then things like bruising very easily. So like sitting in the bath, literally sitting down in the bath, I would get a bruise on my back because my spine was so there, essentially. So things like that would happen a lot. And also just kind of feeling like if you're lying a lot about what you're eating, if you're hiding food so that it looks like you've eaten it, if you're finding yourself thinking, oh, I'll just lie about that, then it's probably got to a point when it's a problem. And kind of putting like exercise and diet above other things, like if it stops you socializing. So if your friend invites you out for a meal and you're like, oh, I'll make up an excuse so I don't have to go to a restaurant because that would panic you too much, then that's probably an issue as well.
The first step for building resilience as dancers towards body image is noticing the common triggers that can result in an eating disorder or make one worse.
For example, calorie counting.
Body labels like dance body or ballet body.
Body comments such as bigger or smaller.
Costume fittings and costume sizes.
Diet talk.
Specific body weights or numbers.
Portion sizes.
Clothing sizes.
And the pressure of eating healthy or clean.
What was your process for your recovery?
So I got referred from my GP to an ED clinic when I was 17 and got assessed and diagnosed properly there. I didn't want to do inpatient, so I did outpatient treatment at home, and I saw a dietitian every week, and I had CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy, and worked with some psychologists as well on that. So basically, you just have to start. It's not easy at all, but you just have to start eating huge amounts, more than a normal person would, to get you out of the kind of risk area with health, and get your body back to how it should be. And then you focus on the mental kind of bit, which is obviously a bit harder normally. And so, yeah, I just did a lot of CBT for that. And I think one thing that really helped was moving away. So when I moved away and got my independence, and I didn't have people checking on what I was eating all the time, or I wasn't thinking about it so much because I had like uni and dance, and I had a bit more of a life outside of food, and food had to fit around that rather than my life having to fit around food. So I think that really helped, and it took my mind off it, and it gave me a goal, because I knew if I went back to the ED, I wouldn't be able to dance again. So that was a big motivator for me. Looking back, obviously I wouldn't wish an eating disorder on my worst enemy. Like, I wish it hadn't happened, but in a way it's shaped who I am, and I now work helping other people with EDs, which I'm glad that's come out of it, if anything. And I think it's made me a lot more aware of things. I think I've actually got a healthier relationship with food than a lot of people who've not had an eating disorder, because I've worked so much on that. So I'm glad that I came through it all. And yeah, I'm just looking back, I'm very proud of myself that I did it, because not a lot of people do. And I think it just makes me want to help other people that are in that position as well. If you are struggling with anything, there's loads of resources and organisations that can help. BEAT is the UK's biggest organisation for eating disorders, and there's another one called First Steps ED, and they're both really helpful. They offer lots of services, things for you to look at, things for parents, things to take to doctors if you're not getting the right treatment, and just guidelines for you and support services.
There are different types of eating disorders that vary from each other. This documentary mainly discusses a restrictive food intake eating disorder, but each individual may have different experiences.
If you or someone you know is experiencing an eating disorder, it's important to seek professional help from a healthcare provider or a therapist specialising in eating disorders.
Early recognition and intervention can increase the chances of a successful recovery.
Despite all the negative factors, there is still a huge amount of positive outcomes on a dancer's mental health from dancing full-time. All of these outcomes vary for each individual and may change with time.
I think a positive side effect of dance is that it just keeps you like physically active and just busy all the time.
So I think one of the main benefits of dancing is definitely keeping fit and staying active, and always having something to do with my days, because I do get very bored without it.
A positive is spending time with your friends and staying fit and healthy. A positive for me is getting to see my friends every day and progressing in all the styles that I love.
So a positive of full-time training is that I get to do what I love every day with people that share the same passion.
A positive would definitely be that I just get to do what I love every day. I wouldn't imagine myself doing anything else.